should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it! It's the best thing going today.
Once again, it is time to get historical on you. It is episode 226 of Top Rope Nation. Ryan Drosty here with Justin Joint and Kyle Ross. And with the King of the Ring returning, gentlemen, this year, and with Kyle just incredibly invested in tournament here in 2021, we thought this is a great time to talk about the King of the Ring tournaments from the past. And Kyle's going to go off tonight on how this year's tournament is going to top them all. Kyle Ross, how you doing tonight?
Well, I was going to say I was doing at least better than John Gruden this week, but after that intro, I don't know how I'm doing.
I'll tell you
what, John, when next time you fire off those emails, you might want to stick to Spider Y2 Banana or whatever that stuff is, buddy. Keep the personal takes in the home.
Justin Joint, how are you doing tonight?
Honestly, I'm still kind of upset from last week with Zach Haydorn Jedi mind tricking me into paying $11 for Undertaker versus Jeff Hardy, and therefore losing out on getting that Clash of Champions tag team match that Kyle Ross priced me out of like a real dickhead.
Yes. By the way, the vote on who wins that draft, since we are recording this so early this week, so we're streaming live right now for our patrons, just like we did last week. It's Tuesday night. Most of you are going to hear this show on Friday morning or after. You could have heard it 3 days early if you were a patron of the show. Check the link here in the description. But I don't have the results of the poll yet because I planned on putting that up tomorrow. I got a little behind on making the graphic for it. It's going to go out on Twitter tomorrow. By the time the show airs, there will be a result. So if you want to see who won our draft, check out twitter.com/topropenation. But we'll talk about it on next week's show. But I thought overall our best TV matches draft was pretty even across the board. I thought we all ended up with some pretty good set of matches.
Yeah, I'd say of all the drafts we've done, this might be the toughest one to call. Mm-hmm. Or there's definitely not one person that stands out as being especially bad.
Agreed.
And most importantly, we had so much fun doing it.
It was very difficult, Justin. The whole auction rule stuff that you came up with, I wasn't expecting it to be as hard as it was, but like once we got into the nitty-gritty of the draft, it was really, really hard to try to apportion all of my $100 and to try to come up with a strategy of how to use them well. And I went kind of all in on my first pick, and then, it leaves you with only $40 or whatever and change to fill out 4 more matches. So it was kind of a new caveat. I liked it though, made it a little different from our past drafts. Hopefully those of you at home liked it as well. And yeah, if you have any feedback, let us know. Join the Facebook group. Link is here in the podcast description. We've had a lot of great discussions going on today, especially over in the Top Rope Nation Pro Wrestling Facebook discussion group. Always stuff going on there. So if you're listening, would love to have you join the group. Kyle, you've been very active on Facebook.com today.
I try. It's Tuesday. It's kind of one of my lighter days of the work week. So I thank you both, by the way, for recording on this day. It really made my week a lot better.
Speaking of Patreon, guys, I do got to throw a shout out. We had a new patron join, I think it was last week, and I couldn't remember if I shouted him out on the air or not. So I want to make sure to thank Rick C. for joining the Patreon page. Of course, everyone that becomes a patron gets access to at least 5 bonus shows a month. We do Top Rope Nation Extra, a full-length bonus show every single week. The only way to hear that is on patreon.com/topropenation. And the monthly bonus podcast, Top Rope Nation Classics. Been doing that for a couple of years. Retro reviews of classic wrestling events. From the feedback we get from our listeners, some of the best podcasts that we do. So thank you, Rick, so much for joining the Patreon page. Very much appreciate your support, and everyone else that are patrons. A lot of you have been there for a long time. We've got the names right now on the bottom of our YouTube stream as we record, and couldn't do this without you. You guys have helped the growth of the show so much. But, you know, if $5 a month for Patreon is not in your budget, what you can do to support us is to leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. And in fact, once again, we have a new review to read on the air. Last week we had 2. Got a new one coming in from the United States of America. This one hits us from Ninhead, or is it 9 Inch Nails Head? I'm not sure.
I believe that's 9 Inch Nails Head if I know who this person is.
5 stars, a triumph. Finally, a wrestling podcast with a host that won't defraud a WWE legend and charities alike. 5 stars. Thank you, 9 Inch Nails Head. Kyle, would you care to comment on that one?
Not on air. And if you guys would like to go above it, beyond being a Patreon and somehow become a co-host of the show, then you can stay after the podcast and I'll tell stories like that to you. But nope, not on this. Not on the airwaves. I'm not telling what he's referring to.
All right. So, and lastly, of course, all of our shows go up in video format. I mentioned we're streaming live right now for Patreon, but this video will go public on Friday, youtube.com/TopRopeNation. Every free channel subscription helps us out a lot. So please do that. Kyle.
Imagine making me feel sorry for Jerry Lawler. I don't know why I said that. I don't know.
I don't know what could that have to do with it. We just recently talked about.
Okay.
All right, let's change gears. Let's get to the topic of the night. That's the King of the Ring, historical. Mostly we're talking about past King of the Rings tonight. I'm sorry, I know I let off talking about 2021. Spoiler alert, we're not going to talk a whole hell of a lot about the 2021 King of the Ring tournament, Kyle, but we are going to talk about those from the past. Or the Queen's Crown tournament. Is that what it's called, the Queen's Crown?
Yeah, it is called the Queen's Crown, yes.
Also not going to get a lot of discussion tonight. Mostly 80s and 90s and early 2000s King of the Ring. And so, Kyle, your notes are elaborate on this. You went to town. I am really pumped for this. It's going to be a great discussion. Take it away, sir. I'm going to let you just run this right off the top.
I'm sorry, Mr. Drosty. Did you say 80s King of the Ring?
Yes, in
okay.
fact.
So some people may not know this, but before King of the Ring became a pay-per-view in 1993, there was an annual King of the Ring tournament held from 1985 through 1991. Not 1990, though, for some reason. They skipped that year. And these events took place in Foxborough, the old Patriot Stadium, Sullivan Stadium, in 85 and 86, and then shifted to Providence, so still in the Northeast, from 87 to 91. In both cities, it drew pretty well the first time, but only to decline greatly. Attendance was really in the toilet by 1991. So in the case of Foxborough, they did 23,000. Again, that's a football stadium they were doing. $20K paid, and that was for the 85 event. There was a Hulk Hogan title defense in a non-tournament match, I believe, against Nikolai Volkov there. They dropped down to $12K the following year in 86. So that's a steep drop, about 50%. And it was a similar pattern in Providence, which sold out the first time, 12,000 in 87. And then basically every year cut in half. They were down to like 2,500 for 91. So as they repeated this in the same market, fans were not really digging it. And that's kind of an ominous sign for a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about here tonight.
Yeah.
I think so. All these numbers are courtesy of Graham's site. Graham, of course, was on our show to do the Great American Bash history of WWE.com, an indispensable resource. I think we would all agree.
Yes,
but for those who are interested, the winners of these respective tournaments in 1985, you had the Magnificent Morocco over the Iron Sheik in a heel versus heel final. In 86, Harley Race beat Pedro Morales. This was the only win acknowledged on TV. Obviously, if you're our age, you remember King Harley Race. 87, Randy Savage defeated King Kong Bundy. 88, Dibiase beat Savage while those two were kind of wrapping up their world title program. '89, Santana over Martel. Strikeforce explodes. And then in '91, Bret Hart over IRS.
Yes, no King of the Ring in 1990. Took a year off.
Yeah.
Kyle, when you went through those winners, some people might have been thinking Randy Savage winning it in 1987. Was that where Macho King came from? And no, it was not. It was not from 1987. In fact, only, as you mentioned, only one of these winners was acknowledged on television, that being King Harley Race. Kind of established him coming into the promotion, as a legitimate main eventer. Of course, he had been a main eventer in the NWA and elsewhere, but that kind of became, how would you term that? It was like the traveling crown almost, because that's the crown then that eventually reached Randy Savage years down the road.
Yeah, okay, we could jump into so it's kind of odd how there were these King of the Ring tournaments taking place yearly or almost every year, but at the same time, the lineage of the crown on TV was quite different. Race held it for a while, and you're right. I know Meltzer was just aghast if you read the old Observers at Vince making him a king. But he had a house show program with Hogan in '87. It's not like, they were just having him getting beat by all these losers. I mean, he was treated, I thought, reasonably well for being at that stage of his career in '86 and '87. But, he gets hurt in a match against Hogan on Saturday's Main Event in early '88. And Haku assumes the gimmick, as people remember. It was a deal where he was part of the Heenan family. Tama had left the promotion, so that kind of made it just kind of a deal that made sense, I guess. But, Haku loses the crown to Duggan, oddly defended it, just Randy, and loses it. And then Duggan loses to Savage later in '89, and then Savage never defends the crown. He lost matches, obviously, as the Macho King, but never defended it. So it was kind of odd how, on TV, the crown gimmick was very independent from these tournaments, and only in 1989 was the crown defended on television, seemingly. Duggan was basically, I don't know if they were just kind of looking for something for Savage to have post WWF title run. And they just viewed Duggan, okay, we'll just have Duggan beat Haku and transition to Savage. I don't know what the thought process was there, but yeah, it was kind of odd how one year of the TV gimmick, they had two guys defend it. And then they never had defended. Because, Race never defended it when he was the king. He lost matches and needed, lose the crown.
Harley Race becoming King Harley Race, and, like I said, he's new to the promotion. Would you say the whole reason for him winning it was just to legitimize him for that Hogan feud?
Probably. I think, again, like I said, Meltzer thought it was the worst thing in the world, the joke, if you read his Observers at the time, but it was a way, I guess, to give him something to be kind of a nod to his past.
Yeah.
And to have some relevancy in the promotion. I didn't think it was a horrible thing or a rib or anything like that. They treated him pretty seriously. I thought, he was at the upper part of the card.
Yeah.
And the thing I want to talk about the most is, I don't know how much you guys had a chance to review this, was these odd matchups in these tournaments. You talk about nobody spending any time booking these tournaments. I already joked about the heel versus heel Magnificent Morocco Iron Sheik final, 85. Imagine being in attendance, and that's what it comes down to. A 1985 WWF fan. You're like, okay. Another one that caught my eye, 88 semifinal. We're getting ready to get finals. Ted DiBiase versus Ron Bass?
Yeah.
That might have been a hell of a match in Florida in '83, but not at 1988 WWF.
And most of these were 16-man tournaments. I think only one was 86 was a 12-man tournament. I think it was 86. Yeah, 86 was a 12-man, right? Or no, that was actually 14. There was two guys with buys.
Yeah, Mr. X and Mike Rotundo got the buys.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. X and Mike Rotundo, I believe, although I can't confirm this, do I have Graham's site up? Oh, I do, and it happens to be on 86. Mr. X was probably Danny Davis, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I had no idea who that was.
It doesn't say. It just, well, okay, hold on. So again, per Graham site, what an indispensable resource here, historyofwwe.com. Mr. X was a sub for Hercules.
Okay.
And again, I know Danny Davis worked the Mr. X gimmick, so I'm assuming it was him, but yeah, a sub. But Mike Rotundo in 1986 getting a bye? What was he doing? The end of the teaming with Dan Spivey and like the sad version of the US Express. That's an odd thing. And God, there were just a couple hoots when I was looking through here. Who was it? I think it was IRS, who we all made fun of earlier, making it to the finals. On his way to the finals in 91, IRS beats the Berserker in a first round match. And then a semifinal. Okay. Bret Hart gets a bye in the semi due to a double DQ of Sid and the Undertaker. Okay, so we're denied an extra Bret Hart match. And the only semifinal is IRS versus Jerry Sags.
You see Bret Hart's opponent in the first round in that tournament? Pete Doherty, the Duke of Dorchester.
Yes, one of the single worst color commentators in the history of this business.
Apparently he lost to Bret in 33 seconds in the first round.
Pete would often lose sub 1 minute when he was called upon on the house show. He would. Yeah. He knew his role, I guess. But there were a lot of like just random people who I thought were maybe locals, but they weren't even like Bill Woods drawing a paycheck in 1989. Bill Woods? Who else was there? I mean, these were just, I was just laughing at these. How about a first round matchup of One Man Gang and Bundy in 87? There was some other guy I'd never heard of before. Rudy Diamond in 86. Your favorite Rudy Diamond moment, everybody.
Yeah. Taking a look. Yeah, these are just bizarre lineups. But, I mean, hey, I guess it's something special for the live crowd.
Well, so. I have in my notes the word special in quotes because that's what this was supposed to be. It was kind of supposed to be a special house show attraction, but based on those attendance numbers I read earlier, not so much. People were not digging this. And again, that big number they drew in 85, Hogan defended against Volkov in a time. So that drew the house, not the tournament. 86, you had a non-tournament match of Bruno Sammartino over the designated hitman. Not Bret Hart, but the designated hitman who was a sub for Eddie Andelman, a local TV radio personality who refused to wrestle. So we were really just pulling stuff out of left field in these non-pay-per-view King of the Rings. None of this has ever made tape. I don't know if somebody has like a handheld or something. I have never.
There's a handheld of 90. There's a handheld of 91, I believe. I think I actually have it on VHS from my tape trading days.
You're telling me I can actually watch this Virgil versus Skinner first round match?
Yes, I don't remember how much of it is on there, but I'm pretty sure it for sure has the finals with Bret and IRS. So
I'll tell you what, man, you got to be a pretty damn good match for me to watch a handheld. Or for me to watch, but, oh baby, this tournament I don't think is going to be high on my list. After I go upstairs after we're done recording tonight.
Yeah, I'm trying to look. I know I had at one point like my tape collection listed on my files here, and I was trying to double check that I have. I'm like fairly certain that I have that. But anyways, let's talk about how they transition then to the pay-per-view, I guess.
Sure. So this was kind of not really a big deal other than the Harley Race thing that we talked about in the pre-pay-per-view years. But most people, when they think King of the Ring, I think of 1993 to 98. I've labeled this a 500 average, but some of the hits were big. And those hits, I certainly don't think I need to tell you guys. Bret Hart's tourney performance in 1993, one of the great one-night efforts. We did a patron show on that entire pay-per-view where we applauded Mr. Hart's efforts. And that was easily, I think, maybe you guys can correct me with a different answer, the best King of the Ring pay-per-view, 93. In terms of being based around the tournament, certainly.
Yeah, I don't think it's even close. It's not even close, really.
Yeah. Owen winning in 94 made a lot of sense to set up the Brett rematch at SummerSlam, him doing what his older brother had done the year before and becoming the King of Hearts. I think we can applaud that. And then obviously, I think when most people think of King of the Ring, they think Steve Austin in 96 and his all-timer promo.
My God, I thought you were going Mabel there.
No.
King Mabel is what most people... That tournament, by the way, the bracket for 95 is just awful.
We will file that one in the misses category, sir. But I have a question for you guys about Steve Austin here. Does he get to where he got if King of the Ring never happens? Like, if he cuts that promo if he just cuts that same promo like at a random event and says what he said.
Yeah, I was going to say, it all comes down to how much you think his push was just from Austin 316. Because if you take that away, then maybe you can start wondering about things. But we've talked about it before. Months later, he was doing pre-show for SummerSlam, right? Mm-hmm. That tournament actually really didn't do anything immediate for him.
Yeah.
And he was not, of course, supposed to win it originally. Triple H was, and then he was punished for the Click incident.
Yeah. So it's kind of a happy accident. What happened at the 96 King of the Ring?
I think if anything, we can probably agree him winning the tournament got him, or at least certainly helped, get that first Brett match at Survivor Series 96. I know, and you guys would probably know this even better than I, Brett wanted to work with Austin when he came back. He had an affinity for him going back to WCW. He's talked about that, but they probably don't put Austin in that position if he's not the King of the Ring.
Yeah, because they had worked together on an overseas tour in 96.
Yes.
Post WrestleMania 12, Brett worked the tour while he was, away on that sabbatical or whatever. He worked these untelevised matches, and he worked Austin during that tour. And then he had already touted him coming into the company because he had seen him in WCW, like you said, Kyle. And then when he got to work with them there, he definitely wanted him to be the guy he worked if he returned to the company in October, which he did on television. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they would have justified Austin in the position because like Justin said, he didn't have a prime spot on SummerSlam 2 months later, but he was still King of the Ring, and he had started to rise. Like, they were putting him on the covers of the magazines. I think this was around the time that they had launched that Raw magazine, because they already had the WWF magazine. Remember, they had Raw, which was, I think they even put it in like a plastic bag for a while. It was supposed to be more controversial. They had more like swimsuit pictures of all the women and stuff. And I think one of the first editions of the Raw magazine was King of the Ring on the cover, Austin with the bloody lip. And it was like in black and white, I want to say. So like he was getting like the covers of the magazine and stuff. So he was definitely on the rise. So when Brett would call him out, it made sense. And he was getting the spots on television where he had been calling Brett out for a couple of months too.
Yeah, that's the letter S in front of Hitman.
And it's important to remember, especially back then, that when somebody won that tournament, it was actually treated like a big deal. They treated Owen like a big deal. And regardless of how you feel about him, Mabel was a big deal. He got the championship match against Diesel. So that was definitely a feather in Steve Austin's cap.
For sure. It was something I thought of here because I've got a larger picture in mind, obviously. And like, if we can even somewhat establish that maybe King of the Ring wasn't that big of a deal for Steve Austin, then maybe, you could see why this particular, nice photo there.
Here it is. That's the Raw magazine on our video stream. Yeah.
Why this concept wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, I think it did matter a little bit, certainly.
In the sense, for one, getting that King of the Ring rub, but also, just like if you can see on the screen here, this cover of Austin with the bloody lip from the Mark Merrow match. You could make the argument that all he really needed was a match against Jake the Snake on a Raw, but I don't know, maybe you lose something if you don't have that bloody lip and making him look like even more of a badass.
Or standing in front of the crown, or in the throne, I should say. Yeah.
True.
So, somebody mentioned, you both have mentioned 95. So let's talk about the misses here at King of the Ring history. I already mentioned 94 with Owen winning. I think gets a thumbs up. That was the right call, no doubt about it. But That pay-per-view, man, you get 3 hours of Art Donovan, something we've got to talk about here. And Vince at that time obviously had other things on his mind, as the steroid trial was full blast and that he didn't even commentate that pay-per-view.
94.
Yeah. So, yeah, 94. So, you know, that show was not good. Roddy Piper and Jerry Lawler was the headliner. You know, two of the all-time greats, but that match sucked so bad. It just did not work. Like, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just gonna say. I mean, Owen had good matches though in that tournament. Like his match with Razor and 1-2-3 Kid are good matches. So I mean, like the tournament, it's not as up to the level of what Brett did the year before. But you know, as a heel, establishing himself and showing, you know, that WrestleMania 10 wasn't a fluke, and he went out and had some pretty damn good matches that night, even with the announcing aside.
Yeah. All right. So Art Donovan, I loved how I posted on our Facebook page today that we were going to do this pod. This was the idea, King of the Ring history. First quote, good buddy Mike Franchito, big fan of the show, just writes Art Donovan. So we have to talk a little bit about Art Donovan because at least one person wants to hear about Art Donovan. So do you guys remember those ESPN commercials Art Donovan did? Justin, I mean, you're my age, so you wouldn't mind. And Brian, maybe you don't remember? He was like that old guy who like would make these funny jokes. He was a Baltimore Colts legend. So because the show was
looking it up right now.
Okay, the show was in Baltimore. So they had Art Donovan, who was kind of popular in pop culture at the time, be the commentator. The issue is only people in Baltimore probably cared about that, and they were not listening to Art Donovan. And also, Art knew nothing about pro wrestling. And I mean nothing. He was asking questions like when IRS came out, this guy looks like a businessman, Gorilla. Does he wrestle like that? And he just kept asking the famous thing everyone talks about. He would continuously how much everyone weighed. The entire show, every guy. And he forgot that he picked Razor. Obviously, someone just like told him to pick Razor remote and the headset early on. And, you know, he had forgotten midway. There's all these funny quotes here. You know, to Luna Vachon, what's the girl over there screaming at? And then like somebody kind of like tells him, he's like, oh, okay, I see. Now I get it. And it was like really awkward. And by the end of the show, Gorilla Monsoon, one of the most notorious no-sellers of all time, if he was irritated, was just ignoring Art Donovan, everything he said. I mean, Art would say something and Gorilla would just not even acknowledge it. I believe he called him Artie O'Donnell, by the way, to open the pay-per-view, which was an ominous start. So not only did Art know nothing about wrestling, Gorilla Monsoon knew nothing about Art Donovan. So this was not exactly a match made in heaven at King of the Ring 94. What an event this was. So yeah, Art stunk. I think the mayor of Baltimore was on the show and said his favorite wrestler was Hulk Hogan, by the way, too.
Oh no!
So
One month before Bash at the Beach and Hogan
Yeah.
Flair. Yeah.
So Owen aside, this pay-per-view was not well regarded as a whole. Owen and the Kid is a great match, and we should point out this is when Jim Neidhart came back to the company. You know, Brett brought him back to be in his corner for the Diesel match, but it turned out to be a ruse by the Anvil, and the Anvil joined up with Owen Hart, which was, I think, a smart call, but again, it's not a good show. And, you know, I don't need to tell you guys or our listeners, 1995, King of the Ring, an all-time bad pay-per-view with Mabel winning.
Real quick before you get to 95. I think probably all of us would agree on 94 that of the pay-per-view era King of the Rings, Owen used the gimmick king stuff the best, right? Like that became part of his character for most of the rest of his career. The whole King of Hearts thing. I mean, it was on his tights like forever. And you know, when you look at the history of the King of the Ring winners, a lot of times, you know, like it could do heels well. Now Brett, like he had the crown, like the goofy crown and cape when he won, but then like he didn't keep it as part of his act. You know, Owen did for a little while, and like it worked for him. So I think like if you look at the pay-per-view era, as far as like using the King gimmick, like Owen is by far the best. Would you guys agree?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, in terms of actually, like, because you're right, like Brett. I mean, he actually lost the rights to be called king, if you remember in the Jerry Lawler feud at SummerSlam. And then like Austin really didn't. You know, he never wore a crown or did anything even remotely regal. So yeah, in terms of like the King gimmick, which we'll talk about in a little bit later on when we examine like the post pay-per-view King of the Rings, he did do a good job with it. I think you're absolutely right. That's a very astute point by you.
And was it ever specifically, and I don't remember, but like, was it just kind of under the table, like fans started to kind of expect that maybe the King of the Ring would get the championship opportunity at SummerSlam? Like, was that ever acknowledged on television as being a stipulation? Because obviously Brett didn't. His King of the Ring victory turned into that feud with Lawler, but Owen got the SummerSlam 94 match with Brett, and then Mabel, got the SummerSlam match with Diesel, unfortunately, an all-time classic, of course.
So I'm looking that one up. I don't remember if it was explicitly done, like if that was on the line.
I don't remember that ever being acknowledged on television, but it was kind of like, I remember it being made like you thought that he would get the title. I don't know, like it was just kind of implied or something. I don't know.
Well, the Mabel heel turn was so out of nowhere that they needed to do something like that to establish him as a champion, a chip contender. We'll talk about that in a minute. The only time I can say for certain it was explicitly stated was the last one, 2002, with Brock Lesnar.
Mm-hmm.
That one, it absolutely was said, the winner of this tournament will challenge whoever the WWF champion is at SummerSlam. And there's an argument. I saw some people on Facebook when we were talking about this today saying, maybe that's a good idea. They should have always done it. It could have been like the Rumble to SummerSlam's, it could have been, the Rumble to SummerSlam being WrestleMania. I don't know if you want to do it every year, but I mean, it makes sense in certain instances. It certainly made sense for Owen to establish him for that rematch and whatnot. You further establish him. I mean, he really had a legit gripe anyway because he had beat Brett at Mania.
Yeah. So, anyways, not to interrupt you, but let's get to 95 because 95 is just that bracket, not just the show itself. I mean, the bracket for the tournament. You could have had Undertaker and Shawn Michaels in the semis.
Well,
instead you got Mabel going over Undertaker in the quarterfinals, and Shawn Michaels and Kama going to a 15-minute draw, so instead of Taker and Shawn meeting in the next round, you got Mabel with no opponent in 95, gets the bye, moves on to the finals. And the other side of that bracket, Kyle Ross, the other four involved in the pay-per-view tournament, not great. not great at all.
Bob Holly, his friends call him Sparky. Or pardon me, Thurman Plug, his friends call him Sparky. The roadie, Yokozuna, and substitute Savio Vega, who got pushed all the way to the final. I'm looking here. This was pre-pay-per-view. I remember this, actually, vividly.
He was sub for Razor.
Yeah.
Razor was injured, yeah.
Yeah. And Savio went all the way to the final. I don't know what the hell they were thinking there, but I see Doink was a first round because they did the qualifying matches on Raw in those days. I remember when Doink came out for the qualifying match. My brother and I were sitting watching this, and we're like, God, I hope Doink isn't in this. And we heard do 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 do, and we're like, oh no! Like babyface Doink by 95 was the drizzling shits, and so was this event as a whole. I mean, look, it's always mocked. I mean, it's won a lot of, I wouldn't say awards, but I think it's kind of been noted by a lot of people as maybe the worst Big Five pay-per-view ever. If you want to, include it was just panned universally at the time with, Mabel.
If that was your guys' reaction to Doink, I can only imagine what your reaction was to Mantar coming out to face Bob Holly.
Yeah.
I always remember Jim Cornette's face when he was out there with Mantar. Just like, what am I doing? like I have no chance to get this over. This thing's Mantar.
Yeah, this show isn't this show famous because there was a lot of very audible ECW chants. It was in Philadelphia.
It was in Philly. Yeah, for sure.
Brett and Jerry Lawler in the Kiss My Foot match. Not part of the King of the Ring tournament, but on the show. Yeah.
as was being de-emphasized at this time at the behest of the Clique, those sorry sons of bitches. But and then let's not forget the main event of this show, the advertised main event. One of the most, I'm not lying, people. Diesel and his good friend, Bam Bam Bigelow, even though the Clique was busy burying him behind the scenes, against Sid and Tatanka, who, in his words, not mine, did what his people should have done all those years ago and take the money.
No.
That's what he said. Don't get mad at me. I know. That's what he said. It was after SummerSlam 94.
Weren't you watching this when your wife heard that and was appalled?
No, it was a different. It was great callback to the Patreon show. That was the 93. She saw like the music hit, and my God, her eyeballs popped out of her head. She goes, "What?"
Are you sure that line didn't come from a John Gruden email?
No, it didn't. No, Tatanka said it. I just did when he turned heel. I just did what my people should have done all those years ago.
Oh no, that's real bad.
It's real bad, and so was King of the Ring 95. Can't stress that enough. Just as a bit of a side, how could you make this show better? Well, there's a lot of ways, obviously, but I just wanted to share with you guys. I think you'll enjoy this. It shouldn't surprise you that I would, if I was given the book for 1995 WWF, basically scrap the entire damn thing, right? Nothing really worked for the majority of that year. But looking back, I would have had Sid beat Diesel for the title at the first In Your House to establish In Your House as a must-watch thing. And Diesel was hurt too. He had an elbow issue, I believe, at that time. So he could take some time off. Have Shawn win King of the Ring. That makes sense. Everyone thought he was going to coming in. Everyone's like, oh, Shawn's going to win this for sure. People did not think Mabel was going to win this tournament. Have Shawn go on to beat Sid for the title. Because remember, they had heat coming off the WrestleMania angle where Sid turned on him the night after. And Shawn's the new champ by SummerSlam. You could have a jealous Diesel come back and turn heel. That's your fall program into Rumble. WrestleMania 12, Shawn defending against Brett. And if Shawn's working, maybe he wins. If Shawn's kind of sucking as champ, we go back to Brett. I think that's a lot better booking than what they did personally. It's easy to say with 25 years of hindsight, but whatever.
Although the problem is that Brett was leaving after 12 for a while, taking a break.
Would he have left, though, in that scenario?
True, if they would have put the belt back on.
If they would have put the belt on him, he would have stayed. If not, then, maybe he could have still done it. He did the match anyway, if the roles were reversed. So, it would have been interesting to see what they would have done.
Could have got him to re-sign up front, like you're going to have a long title run through Survivor Series again or something like that. Yeah.
I just think any way to end that Diesel run earlier than they did is a smart play.
Maybe he could have actually worn the title on Lonesome Dove. That would have been sweet.
Yes. Hell yeah. 96, do you want to talk about that one? We talked about Austin, obviously, a little bit. Anything else we need to cover there?
Not really. Let's go to 97. Same question, which was a shitty tournament. An absolute dog shit tournament. I think as a tournament overall, probably the worst. It was only 8 men. Triple H was eliminated initially, but got back in. And Goldust and Jerry Lawler was one of the quarterfinals, which led to a very regrettable promo at the time by Jerry Lawler that we actually talked about on our Facebook page once. But I'm going to ask the same question about Triple H that I did Austin. You can retcon it and say, oh, Triple H is this big star and he won King of the Ring. That makes King of the Ring look so cool. But I think even more so than Austin, he didn't really get going right after that King of the Ring. We joked about it when we just did the one night only review for patrons. Summer of 97, Triple H went from a not very over Greenwich snob to someone who could carry Shawn Michaels bags. And for that, we should applaud him.
Yeah, I ordered this pay-per-view live. I've told that story many times on the pod. Because they were supposed to have Brett and Shawn at this pay-per-view. They announced it, then they canceled it. And I had already ordered the show, and we rented the cable box and everything. So I watched it live. And yeah, Hunter winning this tournament just did nothing for him. It was just kind of a a downer all around. Like the final 4 on the pay-per-view wasn't great either. I mean, Ahmed was pretty hot in 97 still. He was hotter in 96.
Yeah.
But, Hunter taking him out, and then in Lawler and Mankind, okay, so you get Hunter and Mankind in the finals. Preview what's to come at SummerSlam when they have the cage match. It's an okay match, but yeah, I don't know. Hunter winning it, like, I was not into Hunter Hearst Helmsley at all. And this, like you said, Kyle, this did nothing for him with the crowd. And he didn't do anything of importance until Shawn Michaels lifted him up. Nobody cared about Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until he stopped curtsying and put the polo shirts on and started saying, "Who is the icon?" That's what really kind of got him going. We should point out, because you mentioned something that's very interesting, Ryan, and we need to let the listeners know if they already don't. Starting in 96, and they did it in 97, like you said, in 98, and then again in 01, only the semis and the finals on the pay-per-view, that was lame. And I think a sign that they meaning creative Vince, obviously, we're losing faith as the tournament as a pay-per-view draw or gimmick.
Yeah.
I hated that, because it was the show was called King of the Ring, but it was really no longer being built around the tournament.
Mm-hmm. I think 8 people in the tournament on pay-per-view, like they did with Brett.
Yes.
Showcase a worker like Brett, make this show to legitimize, like, look, this guy can have 3 different matches. He's a great worker. That's a boon to the pay-per-view. It's something that you can get hardcore fans behind, that they want to order the show to see someone like that work 3 times. 4, yeah, not gonna do too much for you. You couldn't have like a 16-man tournament like they were doing at the house shows in the 80s. We saw those bigger tournaments not work well with WrestleMania 4. For example, you end up getting some really short matches and stuff. But I think 8 was the sweet spot. If they could have held it at 8 and made it kind of a worker showcase, it could work.
Yeah, I just, we'll talk about WWE and its relationship with tournaments a little bit later on, but I agree. I mean, if the show's going to be built on King of the Ring, it should be, the King of the Ring should dominate the pay-per-view, not just be like 3 matches, like the two at the beginning and then one that's not even at the end. 96, 97, it wasn't even the main event of the show. There was always a world title match, which I guess brings us to 98, which is, I think, an interesting one to evaluate. Because obviously when you think of King of the Ring 98, everyone thinks of the same thing. It's Undertaker and Foley and Hell in a Cell, and that's justifiably so. They should think of that. But that's, not part of the tournament, obviously. So, people aren't even at that point thinking of the tournament itself when championing the pay-per-view. A little bit of a discussion here on Facebook we had with Ken Shamrock winning. I thought Shamrock was the right call in 98. If you go back and watch, it was a way for him to get over on The Rock, because he had been feuding with The Rock most of 98, and they did a lot of dusty finishes where he didn't win the IC title. So him pinning him in a scenario where he didn't have to, Rock could keep the IC title, I think was smart. And look, it's a testament to Rocky. He still got over. I think he did okay. I don't think he needed that win, really, in retrospect. I think he did just okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Shamrock isn't at the level of some of the other winners, the Bretts, the Austins, what have you, but it's like he had a good 1998. I liked Robo Shamrock in the heel role for the corporation.
Yeah.
I don't know what you got.
You look at the 98 bracket, and I don't remember being like particularly invested in it at the time, but now with 23 years of hindsight, when you look back at it and you see some of the matches, even going back to like the first round on TV that aired when they had their, 16 people originally were in it, and then they had first round quarterfinals on TV. You see some matches where you're like, your curiosity is, you're intrigued a little bit. You got Triple H and X-Pac, you got Owen Hart and Scorpio, Too Cold Scorpio, Vader and The Rock, like a lot of legends that are paired up together, which at the time, like I said, I don't remember being that enthralled with this tournament, but looking back now, it's kind of like, I kind of want to check that out now a little bit.
Totally agree. But also very telling of the time is even just looking at the first round in the match lengths, the longest one was 5 minutes and 16 seconds. Owen Hart and Scorpio.
Yeah,
They were
Wow.
all under
Wow. Yeah.
we've reviewed a 98 Raw before. You weren't getting a lot of TV time in Raw. I mean, matches
No.
did not go that long. In that TV draft we just did last week, we were, that 2-man power trip against Benoit and Jericho, which is not more than a 15-minute match, I don't think, was considered astounding at the time in 2001. But yeah, you guys are right. This is kind of an interesting bracket. It was certainly an improvement over 97. I know everyone was thinking they were going to do Shamrock versus Severn in the final, the two UFC guys. But Rock beating Severn on the pay-per-view in the semi was considered a bit of an upset and the right call.
Mhm.
Dan Severn, God bless him, was a great UFC fighter in his day, but a very boring professional wrestler.
Yes. Agreed.
I'm going to hold this face as long as I can.
Never had much to say, Dan Severn.
Nope.
Yes. 99?
Oh, no, actually, I wanted to say one thing here
Okay.
before we move on to those. If you're wondering, like I did, about how King of the Ring did pay-per-view buy-wise compared to the other big five in this era, it did do more pay-per-view buys than Survivor Series in both 93 and 95. Came close in 96, but, obviously it never would touch a Rumble or SummerSlam. But if you're beating Survivor Series, I guess you've got a viable place as a big five, I guess. And for the record, I kind of was aghast at it beating Survivor Series in 95, given how much we ripped on King of the Ring in 95. But the 95 Survivor Series did the all-time record low for a big five pay-per-view. I think it only did like 125,000 buys.
Yikes.
I'm going to hold this face as long as I can.
That's why you guys need to be watching on YouTube. Yeah.
It was 125 or 150. It was something just absolutely fucking heinous. So yeah, so it's okay. I think if we're doing this podcast in 98 and you're like, tell me about King of the Ring, I'm probably saying, well, I'd like to see that, have 8 matches on the, an 8-man tournament on the pay-per-view again, but it's okay. It belongs on the pay-per-view calendar, right? Is that a fair comment, do you think? Can you guys remember your 18 or Ryan 15-year-old self?
Mm-hmm.
You probably would have thought that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the decline of King of the Ring as a pay-per-view concept, shall we?
Billy
19...
Gunn? Dude, it's even just evident when you look at this bracket compared to 98 how, I think the 99 roster in WWF is pretty weak compared to 98. And I mean, I even just saw this. I did a thing with Haydorn over at the Torch about a year ago where we looked at Austin's 99 pay-per-view run, and it was just so much repetition. There wasn't a lot for him to work with at the top of the card, and the undercard in 99 just wasn't great either. Now, obviously in 2000 it improved a lot with the influx of some new talent and everything, but 99, this King of the Ring bracket, man, it is a big step back from 98, I gotta say.
Yeah, 99 is, the one of the more critically reviled years in WWE. And it's crazy because it was such a popular year for WWE.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning part of the year, they arguably had their strongest mainstream penetration ever. Remember, that was when Austin got the Rolling Stone cover. They destroyed the NBA playoffs in the ratings on TV. I know there's always so much just discourse here in 2021 about sports and how it takes a bite out of wrestling's ratings. At that time period, late 98, early 99, remember the NFL was scratching its head over Monday Night Football? Raw was taking a bite out of Monday Night Football in the demo. So it's odd, but you're right, Ryan, to your point. 99 stinks. And I think for most people, when they think of 1999 WWF, at least the first 8 or 9 months, they think Vince Russo, right? That was when he had his strongest influence on the product. And it just, when you go back, it's not great to rewatch 99. And certainly your boy, Mr. Ass, love the Gun Club in AEW. Love is maybe a strong word, but I enjoy him a little bit more. just because I think they're where they should be on the card. But Billy Gunn winning King of the Ring is not where he should have been on the card in 1999. Just a real cataclysmic mistake, I thought.
Full disclosure, it didn't really bother me at the time. Talking about looking at the roster and, if not him, who, and, I always thought he had the look of somebody who could maybe take that step up into a main event, maybe a semi-main event scene. And you look at like a lot of the past winners, and that's kind of what they were. It's like, oh, this could be the next guy. And a lot of them did end up being, having really strong runs. I always thought Billy Gunn had the look. Obviously, there was a lot of other stuff holding him back, and he never quite got there. Bad gimmicks, being number one. But in the moment, I was actually, let's see what they're going to do with this Billy Gunn push.
That's interesting because when we criticize booking, what's the first question you should always ask? Well, what would you do instead? Mm-hmm. And it's tough. I think, 95, I laid it out, and I feel very comfortable with what I laid out in 95. Here, I don't, as much as Billy Gunn stunk as a winner based on, what followed. And by the way, Chad, I know you're listening. Okay. We always reference him once on the show. No, he should not have beaten The Rock at SummerSlam. Okay. Stop. Because I know he's cursing, he's freaking eating some Doritos, listening to the pod right here, talking about it. No, he should. And I loved listening to Bruce's podcast, and we'll talk about Bruce again a little bit later on. Conrad's like, how did Rock feel about working with Mr. Ass? And Bruce is like, hated it. Remember when he completely would just eviscerate him in promos, and Mr. Ass was saying like, okay, I guess I'm not as good. Yeah. But you're right. It's tough to make a case for someone else at this point in 99. I think if you could back up even further, Justin, had they not jobbed out the Big Show so early in his run, I think again, this would have gone against your work rate concept, Ryan. But I think Big Show just winning 3 matches in dominant fashion and maybe going on to wrestle Austin would have been a smart move. Or Triple H could have used it in 99. Because remember, he struggled to get over pre-Stephanie.
Yeah.
He was, it was a fight to get him over at this period.
Yeah, looking at the roster, the only other thing I can think of is they could have tried to get some headlines by having China win it.
Ryan.
Ryan, they had her win the IC. They had her win the IC title. She was in the Royal Rumble. I could have seen that happening.
Yeah, and I don't give a damn what anyone says. That sucked. Someday we're going to talk about.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying I would have done it. I'm saying that's the only other way I could see them doing that to try to get some mainstream attention.
What if I told you that I have probably never been more irrationally fired up watching wrestling than I was when Road Dogg beat China in this tournament? I remember watching this live, screaming at the television, if China wins, I'm done. China? So, one day on this pod, we will talk about Survivor Series 99 when they had China beat Chris Jericho. And I will use some of the most just over-the-top, explicit language that has ever been said on a wrestling podcast. One of the most disgusting things to ever take place on a WWE pay-per-view, and think of the ground that covers.
But again, this is the problem. You look at it, and that roster, at least for the tournament, but I think as a company as a whole on the undercard, just wasn't great.
It wasn't there. No, You're right. And Austin didn't want to work with some of these up-and-comers like the Jarretts and the Guns, and same with Rockies. But you referenced earlier, Ryan, and this will make a nice transition. The roster was much better in 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Radicals came in. Jericho had come in by that time. This is the year where I gave up on King of the Ring as a pay-per-view concept. Look at the names in this tournament. There were no good matches. If you can't, with the Jerichos, the Redacteds, the Guerreros, the Angles, if you're not having good matches in a tournament format, then scrap this piece, man.
That was competitors. 32.
Yeah, but that pay-per-view, I think, was regarded as the worst WWF pay-per-view of 2000.
They did go back to having the quarterfinals on the pay-per-view.
Yes.
So they did have,
well, in 99
people.
they did too, I think.
Okay.
I'm almost positive they did. But yeah, they did it. And you're like, oh, I remember when I was like, holy shit, 32 guys and the names are like, I'm like, all right, King of the Ring, they're going to do this right. And they didn't. That was a bad show.
Yeah.
Briscoe v. Patterson didn't help in a non-tournament match, but I mean, it was bad, that show. That to me is when King of the Ring died, when they couldn't have any good matches here.
Which is too bad because it's an inspired choice to win it with Kurt Angle.
The correct winner, absolutely. But yeah, they did.
You almost had two ass-inspired King of the Rings in back-to-back years. You could have had Billy Gunn and Rikishi the next year with the stink face.
It was just absolute trash that they had. They had Jericho, Benoit, and Guerrero all lose in the quarterfinals. I know Jericho worked Angle. That should have been the final, in my opinion. You look at where those two were, the ascendancy they were going on. That should have been your final for sure. I think there would have been a lot of drama. But all three of those guys lose in the quarterfinal. Instead, we have Crash Holly, God rest his soul, Rikishi, and Val Venus. Do not God rest his soul. Hello, ladies. I've got some shitty political takes. Did he get banned from Twitter.com, by the way?
I don't even remember, man. I think
he should be.
I don't know if I blocked him or he blocked me a while ago, but yeah, you look at the names in this tournament, though, when you go back to the 32 names and the fact that you end up with Crash Holly, Rikishi, and Val Venus, when at the very beginning you had Eddie Guerrero in this tournament, Dean Malenko, Redacted, Perry Saturn, like a ton of talent, Edge, as you mentioned, Jericho, and that's the final four we end up with. Yeah. Come on.
Rikishi was over, to his credit.
He was over.
Rikishi's a guy who should have got a run, but come on, man.
Well, I still feel, though, that King of the Ring always needed to be a workhorse tournament.
Yes,
though.
It did. And WWE never does workhorse tournaments. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. 2001, the tournament was really de-emphasized. If people remember, they were thinking people were interested in the WCW invasion going into that show. That DDP showed up at that pay-per-view to reveal himself as the stalker of the Undertaker. He might have. I don't know if he did on Raw first, or did he reveal himself at King of the Ring? I can't remember.
I feel like it was Raw, but I can't remember for sure.
Okay, but I know they had this atrocious brawl, him and Taker, where Taker just kicked his ass and killed the Angle dead. Right there. And Booker made his debut on that pay-per-view. So no one was really talking. Angle had a match against Shane McMahon, which was pretty wild. If you guys remember.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing, is that the tournament was only used to get to that match, because I believe in Angle's first match, Shane made sure he won, and then cost him the match in the King of the Ring finals.
Yeah, so King of the Ring is setting up other matches on the show, and that's an excellent point by Justin Joint. That it's just at this point a complete mid-card thing. 2002. You would think Brock winning and earning a WWE title shot would make for a good pay-per-view. It did not! That show also was not well regarded. I believe it was in Ohio, in Columbus. Had a real stinker of a title match, Triple H and The Undertaker. Imagine that.
Oh, our love for Paul Levesque on this podcast.
God, you talk about two people I just despised in 2002.
Yeah.
Triple H and The Undertaker. Holy God almighty.
Biker Taker era.
Yeah.
Not great. Never got behind it.
You and I really went off about that in our Backlash 02 recap.
Yep.
Also available for patrons.
Yes. Man, that archive on Patreon, gotta say, strong. 50 plus podcasts. That's a good one.
It's the finest thing pro wrestling today.
Yeah. Outside of AEW? Yeah.
So, looking at these four, 99 to 2002, only 2000 top Survivor Series in terms of number of buys. Was pretty close over the other 3 years. So it's still holding its own as a big five, but ultimately it is abandoned as a pay-per-view concept in 2002. And I'm going to mention this now. It's later in the notes, but I think it fits well now. I was listening to a Bruce Pritchard podcast many years ago, and this stuck with me. I didn't even have to look it up or anything. It will always stick with me. He was telling a story, and this is great too, because he can't run from it because they weren't doing King of the Ring. And Bruce, I don't think, was even back with the company at this point. So, but he couldn't cover for, he would never say this now because they're doing King of the Ring again. But Bruce told this story that the creative team in 2003 was getting ready to put together King of the Ring. And Vince walks in and he's like, well, what are you guys up to? He's like, oh, we're putting together King of the Ring. And Vince goes, I'm not making this up, King of the Ring. King of the Ring sucks. And
why does it suck, Vince?
Yeah. And
who's responsible for that?
If our listeners remember anything from this podcast, I want them to remember that the chairman of the board, so when I'm ripping on King of the Ring here, and perhaps, throwing a little shade on your childhood memories, folks, the chairman of the board said this concept sucked to his own creative team. King of the Ring sucks. What's interesting is that was a Bad Blood 03 recap that they were doing. And so that was the first brand only pay-per-view. So I don't know if they just abandoned it because they wanted to do the brand only. I don't know if King of the Ring would be a Raw only thing or what it was. It was just a convenient way to drop it. But I think that is eye-opening that Vincent Kennedy McMahon told his creative team, this concept sucks. That's all you need to know, sports fans. But despite those quotes, Vince was, I assume, talked into bringing it back in later years. It was revived sporadically. These tournaments occurred solely on TV. They were not pay-per-views. Booker T wins it in 2006.
Go ahead. Just for the record, I'd say Booker T behind Owen Hart probably used the actual gimmick the best.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll mention that here in a second because somebody actually tweeted about this today. An interesting name tweeted about that. But Booker won in 06, Regal 08, Shane 2010, Wade Barrett in 2015, and then Baron Corbin in 2019. What do all those people have in common? All heel winners.
Mm-hmm.
But, Justin, you just made a very astute point about King Booker pulling off the crown so well. And he went on to actually win the championship as the king. It was so over the top, it worked. But Brian Gewirtz, former head writer of Raw in the Ruthless Aggression era, had it. How timely. He tweeted this today as we recorded it. He was ripping on the idea of everyone having to become this cartoon king. He did acknowledge that Booker pulled it off well. But he's like, what do you guys think of that? We talked a little bit about it with, Race and Owen, how they were able to kind of keep it above the fray, the gimmick. But being this cartoon king that they do is just terrible. It makes the guys look like such a mid-card act, like Corbin and whatnot. Didn't The Rock just buried him how he looked.
Yeah, the Corbin thing was just cringeworthy. It went on just forever and ever and ever.
None of these people did anything. I mean, Sheamus maybe had kind of an okay run around that time. There it is. What a great tweet by you. Or a great find by you.
Production, and I got it on the video screen now. Yeah.
Great production there with you. There's the Gewirtz tweet right there. But
yeah.
If it'll never happen, but the winner of King of the Ring doesn't need to hashtag King of the Ring, doesn't need to magically transform into a king afterwards. Legally, the winner of the French Open doesn't have to wear a beret, carry a baguette, and scream, help me with my French here, Ryan. Sacre bleu?
I took German. I don't know.
Okay. For a year. Plus, no one will ever top at Booker T 5 times. So, yeah, I agree. I also loved, by the way, how WWE tweeted out this picture of Sami Zayn today wearing the crown, and everyone thought it was Jim Duggan. There were multiple people on my timeline saying, gotta be honest, thought that was Jim Duggan.
Now I gotta find that. Talk while I find this.
Okay.
I gotta pull up my production skills and find that on short notice. But,
okay, yeah. Justin, I mean, the cartoon king. that's not a main event thing. If you want it, like, some people are able to, like Owen can use it and be a main event gimmick, but like just being this dopey, like, like high school play king,
It's
stinks.
It's situational. You got to have a plan in place, maybe some good ideas. Like with King Booker, they had the King's Court, which helped him out. His band of goons. But yeah, no, just to have somebody wear a crown and that be the gimmick. I mean, you're just as well go back to the days of having occupations as gimmicks. There's really no difference.
Yeah, it's just really just sad. And I mean, like, your favorite memories of Bad News Barrett in 2015.
That's weird because he already had a good gimmick.
Yeah, remember they didn't like it though. Like I agree. Like I thought him coming out that got like
that was over. I thought.
I don't think it got heat, but people reacted. But at least I'm afraid I've got some bad news. But I mean, other than Booker, this just didn't do anything. Yeah. Okay. There's the.
Is that the picture?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the picture. Yeah. WWE tweet. If Sami Zayn became King of the Ring, what would his first role of creepy? Doesn't it kind of look like Jim Duggan a little bit?
Yeah.
I think it was Voices of Wrestling that said it. So I could be wrong, but yeah. Those were the post pay-per-view years. They've of course brought it back this year with the added bonus of the Queen's Crown. Maybe we could touch on that a little bit here as we bring this podcast home, but. I wanted to ask you guys a question. You guys, two very smart fans. Why hasn't King of the Ring been all that successful despite the big names winning it? Like Brett and Austin or Triple H or Angle? It's just, to me, I mean, the fact it was abandoned as a pay-per-view concept and Vince McMahon said it sucked. I mean, that kind of, let's kind of figure out where the disconnect is there.
I think part of it is just winning and getting a crown and, getting a moniker instead of getting an actual title opportunity. Everybody, obviously the Royal Rumble is pretty unique compared to most other things. But you win, you get a championship. Now, it wasn't always the case. Not that you get a championship, you get a championship match at WrestleMania. It wasn't always the case, but it was a nice refresher. And personally, if they would have treated the King of the Ring more like the Olympics or a World Cup, maybe it comes around every 3 years. That way you're not shoehorned into every year having to put somebody in a world title match, especially at SummerSlam, because you probably want to build storylines instead of just tournaments. But, New Japan did it pretty successfully for years where they kind of just have tournaments that get you to your next feud. So it should have worked, but especially in those, the late 90s, early 2000s, it really wasn't about match quality. It wasn't about work rates. It was about hokey storylines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about the stakes. Like, oh, okay, you win King of the Ring and you get the crown and you wear the dumb cape and who cares? Like, what does that matter? I think if they could have firmly established this as SummerSlam title opportunity, it could have been much better long term. But also just WWE, as I know you're going to talk about, Kyle, in the notes here, just doesn't do tournaments well.
No.
And it's just like the way the promotion has been run, like it's never been the workhorse promotion. And you kind of have to be that to have a good tournament. Like look at New Japan. I think, we've talked about in the past how like in the 80s, if I would have been older, I probably would have been more of a Crockett person just because of the style of wrestling that I like. I wasn't old enough to make that, I liked the characters more when I was a kid. But if I would have been my age now in the 80s or like even a teenager, like I would have been tuning into that kind of wrestling. And I feel like when you're going to see someone wrestle multiple times, perhaps in one night like Brett and Owen did, you need to be able to have different kinds of matches. And we know like today, WWE doesn't do that. They have guys work all the same way, and that's not going to play into a tournament style very well. So like AEW, I think, they're going to do the Owen Hart tournament. That could be really good because they let people have freedom. This WWE tournament this year has not been good. And really like ever since they went away from the Brett and Owen tournaments, he never let anyone stand out like work rate wise. And if you don't have the work rate aspect to a tournament, it's never going to work in the way that fans want to see. Because if you're just booking your promotion behind characters, if you see the character too much over and over and over, you get tired of it. So the tournament just gets tiresome, I feel like.
There's a certain way you have to book a tournament. And yeah, you alluded to it, right? The WWE just doesn't do that well. I think Vince McMahon probably, if I had to guess, just doesn't like tournaments. He's done them before. I mean, WrestleMania 4 was a tournament. You joked about that. And, I as a vehicle to get Randy Savage the WWE title, I guess it worked, but getting there was pretty bad. I think the individual pieces weren't good. It's just, people love tournaments, right? I mean, March Madness is one of the most popular things in this country, and people love looking at the bracket and picking who's going to win. WWE, I don't know if Vince just isn't into that kind of thinking or what. It's just, it's never really like, we could have this matchup, down the line, or there, it kind of requires, I hate when people say this, but that real sports build or whatever. You need to kind of turn that way. And it's just not in the WWE's wheelhouse. Honestly, the best tournament they ever did besides 93 King of the Ring. Well, the best tournament to ever take place under the WWE banner was the Cruiserweight Classic, which not coincidentally had nothing to do with Vince McMahon. So
work rate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think in terms of like, people are going to raise their eyebrows when I say this, is the Deadly Game at Survivor Series, which had no good it had no good matches whatsoever, but they actually like kind of told a story throughout that. Now the way they did it is not for everybody, but I think that's the best way you're ever going to get like a Vince McMahon book tournament. I don't think he's ever going to book a tournament the way fans like us want, or certainly like they do in other promotions like New Japan.
But okay, but that's the thing is, and it's something we've railed against over and over and over again ad nauseum, is that tournament, Deadly Games, that was used because they had the story in mind and the time to do it, in the time at the right spot. Whereas today, just like with a Hell in a Cell or Elimination Chamber, where it's shoehorned into a schedule instead of done at the right time, a tournament done at the right time could still work.
Yes, it really worked perfectly. They had like so many different things going on with, the Austin McMahon feud and then Rock turning heel. I mean, it was really a perfect storm the way they did it. They should be commended for that. Here's another thing, and this is something Meltzer wrote years ago. Can't remember when he wrote it, but it was talking about tournaments as a pay-per-view concept with American wrestling fans. And obviously, wrestling fans have changed over time, but people kind of want to know what they're buying as a pay-per-view. So this is kind of just referring to King of the Ring as a pay-per-view concept. Do people not particularly WWE fans not really get into the idea of they don't really know what the big match is going to be? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know if I buy that, because, if you're buying a pay-per-view, it's even if you set it up with just the semifinals, you should have two good matches right there. And then you should have intrigue on at least two guys. And that's why you'd be buying, is because they should be able to build enough intrigue into seeing one of those guys go on to win the tournament.
Should and did are two different things, though. I think it just
correct.
It always seems to me with like the WWE fit, like, and who deserves the blame or what, we could go on and on. But I just think that like the WWE, they've never done a good job at kind of getting over the tournament concept where people would care, like how you just mentioned. I think Justin, it's just I think for many, many years, wrestling fans, they just were interested in the big match, right? Not necessarily like, okay, here's 14 guys and hopefully we'll get like a really big thing. In WrestleMania 4, in that case, they actually, that was built around Hogan and Andre for the third time in a second match. And even then, I don't know if it was too quick to come back with that or what, but that show did not do well on pay-per-view at all, relatively speaking. And King of the Ring, as we talked about, okay, it beat Survivor Series a couple of years, but it didn't do well either. I just thought that was interesting that maybe, again, today it's different, but in like the early 90s, the WWF fan, I think maybe they were just like, ooh, what match is going to happen?
I will say, I do believe that WrestleMania 4 definitely put the seed in Vince McMahon's mind or head that tournaments don't work. But I don't think I would blame the actual tournament on people not buying that pay-per-view or doing a lesser number. I think you got a lot of other factors.
There were. I remember I was into it. I think we've all three talked about, we like the idea of wrestling tournaments. It's just that this company, by the way, the first WWF pay-per-view, what was it? A tournament, the Wrestling Classic in '85. So, I mean, there's some affinity for it, but I don't know. I think Vince just doesn't really like it, and my guess is he had to be talked into it, bringing it back again this year, for sure. I mean, like, you just look at it, it's just something to tell his buddy, the Crown Prince, oh, hey, we're doing the King of the Ring and the Queen's Crown.
Especially in today's landscape, it seems like a no-brainer, like especially with the last 10 years with the way the roster has been filled out to fill out your TV with how boring and monotonous it can get. Have a tournament, even if it's just for a vacated IC or US championship or something. Just put some stakes on it and let it go for like a month of shows.
Yeah, and the way they're doing it now is really heinous, in my opinion, where it's just like two random matches within a 3 or 2 hour show. Like the show, like it doesn't even, like it just feels like, oh, and these are the King of the Ring matches. But then like those end, and it's like, all right, well, let's go to the other parts of the program. Yeah. Like there's just no stakes whatsoever in it. There's not enough big names. This year in particular, both the men and the women, there's just not enough big names. Like, why were these people pulled? First of all, you're starting with 8 people only. Why is Jinder Mahal in it? And freaking Dewdrop.
Dewdrop, yes.
So I mean,
Kyle's rooting hard for Dewdrop.
Yeah, in the old days when they would you would go back to the qualifying matches and there were 16 people in it, the roster size, going back to Justin's point, was small enough where it felt like anyone who was worth a damn was part of it. Here in 2021, it just feels like they just picked 8 random people out of a hat. I mean, and if the big names don't want to be in it and aren't talking about it, why should I as a fan care? And that goes back to the 90s. It was like, okay, well, this show's going to be built around a WWF title match. And, there's going to be a semi-main. The established top guys, well, they're too good for King of the Ring. And then King of the Ring is just like your 8 mid-carders. That's just not the way to build a pay-per-view concept. I know that's never coming back as a pay-per-view concept probably, but that's why it failed. At least part of the reason as a pay-per-view concept, in my opinion. Yeah.
You look at the first 2 and like Brett, former world champion, winning the first one. Razor, the IC, he had been the IC champion. Was he the IC champion when that tournament was going on? Yeah, he was, wasn't he? King of the Ring 94.
Yeah, he was King.
Yeah, he was the IC champion.
No, Diesel was.
Oh, Diesel was. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he had been that year. And, Owen had the big win over Brett at Mania. So, like, you had established, top level stars in those tournaments. And then, it gradually becoming the mid-card tournament is what doomed it, I think. But I agree with Justin that probably Mania 4 put the seed in Vince's head, and he was never really going to give it a chance. Like, he had that kind of block about having tournaments on programming ever since.
Yeah. And, you talk about work rate. We've thrown out that word a few times. Just not a lot of great King of the Ring tournament matches through the years. Yeah. I mean, obviously, everyone's going to point to Brett and Perfect. We raved about it when we reviewed the 93 pay-per-view. Every bit as good as the more heralded SummerSlam 91 match. But other than that, and like Owen and the Kid, which you touched on again, Ryan, which is like one of the best sub 5-minute matches in company history. People should check it out. I mean, all you need is, you don't even need 5 minutes to watch this. Just not a lot. Austin and Mero was pretty good at 96, but I mean, name your other 2 favorite King of the Ring matches. Can you? I mean, I can't. You know me. I mean, I go through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb. I couldn't pick Another one.
Yeah. Brett and Razor and Owen and Razor. There you go.
I mean, even that Owen Razor, it was kind of like a backdrop for an angle where Jim Neidhart does the heel turn. Like, it wasn't like probably their best match that they were capable of having.
No, they had a really good match on a Raw in, I think, 95, Owen and Razor.
Yeah.
It's really good. I think it was in Houston. Yeah.
Yeah, but like that was just basically like they came out and they just wanted Jim Neidhart to turn heel. So, yeah, a lot of reasons why King of the Ring hasn't worked. And, I don't have any faith in whomever wins the King of the Ring and Queen's Crown here will do much, because it's just so random, the people involved.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at the brackets on the screen right now. To me, like, the only intrigue was that they do Xavier and Kofi here in the semis, and then Kofi lost to Jinder, so we're not getting that. I mean, Sammy and Finn should be a pretty good match, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about two people, in my opinion, would rather be somewhere else.
Where would that be?
I don't know.
Impact Wrestling.
Yeah. But, if you had Xavier, to your point, Ryan, Xavier wrestle Kofi Kingston, them putting their friendship and tag team aside for, a few minutes to win this thing would get over how important it is.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do that, apparently, because we don't want to hinder Jinder in 2021. I mean, come on, man. That bird has flown, as the Beatles sang so many years ago.
And that's the weirdest thing is, like, you could have done Xavier and Kofi in the first round. Give the people what they want.
Yeah.
Boy, I hope Cesaro's glad he resigned.
That is still mind-boggling to me.
Okay, and look, man, I know people are going to get the dirty diapers out. I'm going to say it, and I don't give a damn. The Queen's Crown bracket is an embarrassment. The left side of that bracket, God bless these women, but, like, come on, man. I mean, poor Liv Morgan. I don't know if they're just fucking with her or not.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got to have one foot out the door, right? At this point, I mean, I mean, these pretend pushes they give her just to rip the rug out is just, I can't.
I don't get it. They even made a documentary about her. Yeah, yet they never push her. It makes no sense.
And remember, the entire basis of that documentary was plans change, pal.
Yeah,
like it was her getting hyped up, and then the plans would change, and her not getting what she thought. It was just basically a mid-Carter being frustrated with the creative process. This was put on the WWE Network.
Zelina Vega advancing over Toni Storm. I mean, that's heinous.
I know our good buddy Frank had a lot of things to say about Toni Storm's promo.
That's true, he did. Frank has always got great takes in the Facebook group. Keep them coming, Frank.
I wouldn't mind having both Frank and Tim Jensen on the show, where we could have like a race, where we could have a race. Where we could have just a race who could be the most critical of WWE. Like, who
the
would
most
hate
anti-WWE show ever.
Yeah. Do drop it, Nanny? This Dana Brooke, after being mocked by Corey Graves, was in this tournament. After, I don't really know what she's done to her. I think let's put her in the Queen's Crown tournament. If Shayna doesn't win this thing, somebody should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, I mean, look at that Final Four. Zelina, Carmella, Doudrop, and Shayna. I mean, for God's sakes.
And also, isn't Shayna known as the Ace of Spades? So, of course, she's going to win Queen of Spades? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not you're thinking of Lemmy.
Yes.
But you know what would have been great here? Because, I mean, Charlotte isn't on that Crown Jewel card. Okay. Charlotte, the Queen. You think she would be interested character-wise in this tournament? Why not do a Charlotte-Shayna Baszler final where Baszler beats Charlotte to set up a title program? I mean, is that hard?
That'd be interesting.
I mean, am I speaking in Swahili to the WWE creative team? I mean, has it come to this?
I mean, just common sense. Good wrestling booking is usually very simple. They overcomplicate things and they make it just unwatchable.
Yeah, like I said,
nothing intriguing here. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, though, they're just some phony gimmick for the Crown Prince. By the way, Mansoor's going to go over, so at least one hometown guy will go over in a WWE pay-per-view in 2021. Let this be a lesson learned to all the other folks on the WWE roster. If you want to go over in your hometown, the executive of your state should just be this huge authoritarian and have $50 million to blow.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Imagine if Kim Reynolds forked over $50 million to Vince McMahon and said,
"Oh no,
I want Seth Rollins to go over."
Hey, I think so I was reading about this last night. Nobody listening to this is going to care, but there's a WWE Des Moines house show on a Sunday in December. I believe it's going to end up being TLC from what they haven't announced it yet, but PW Insider had a report that the December pay-per-view is that day, and they've already started selling tickets for it. Right now it's advertised as just a super show house show. It might end up being TLC in Des Moines. They never had a pay-per-view in Iowa. WCW did. The infamous Sold Out.
Never had a pay-per-view?
No.
Oh.
Tons of TV, obviously, but WWE has never had a pay-per-view here. WCW did with Sold Out, that awful pay-per-view, which Justin Joint was at. But no, WWE, WWF has never had a pay-per-view.
Wow.
State of Iowa. It's like it's like December 18th or 19th or something. I don't know. PW Insider claimed that date was going to be TLC. It hasn't been officially announced. There's a Des Moines house show that night, so we'll see.
What if you guys what if there is a pay-per-view that night, but it's not in Des Moines, and you guys just get some rando house show opposite of pay-per-view?
Head to head. Yes. Head to head with it. So, all right. I mean, that's the history of King of the Ring. If you want a deep dive on King of the Ring history, the best one ever, 93, check out the Patreon page. We talked about it at the top of the broadcast, but yeah, we did about a year ago, Top Rope Nation Classics on King of the Ring 93, a real deep dive on the event. You can find that only at patreon.com/Top Rope Nation. Link here in the podcast description. Guys, I always enjoy the history shows the most. This was a good time. Yep. Kyle, I appreciate you putting in the work here with the historical notes. The show notes made this very smooth. So thank you for doing the research, sir. Justin Joint, thank you for joining as always. And yeah, any parting comments before we take it home?
Some say next week could be a wild week in Top Rope Nation. Let's not say anything, but it could be a wild week. The listeners will not know what's coming. In my opinion.
Yes, we have something very good, I think, in the works for.
Yeah, we got some
especially
wild plans.
a subset of our listeners will very much enjoy it if this comes together.
Yes, and I think it will. I've talked. I think plans can always change, pal. But I think this one's booked. I think it's on the sheet. My little pencil.
Very nice.
Do.
Awesome. Well, hey, yeah, everyone check out the podcast feed here on the flagship feed, wherever podcasts are found next week for that. In the interim, we will have Top Rope Nation Extra dropping our bonus show. I think usually we do it on Wednesday nights. It's going to be this weekend because AEW is airing on Friday and Saturday night. So I think Kyle and I are planning on recording Sunday. Top Rope Nation Extra will drop Sunday then, exclusively on Patreon.
Yeah, who knows where this arms race between SmackDown and Rampage is going to end up by that point, man. They're both just trying every gimmick in the book. I love it. Imagine not liking this. Where people just are adding random half hours and hours anywhere they could find them.
Unbelievable. So yeah, we'll have a show recapping all the craziness from this weekend. That's Top Rope Nation Extra. That's the Patreon bonus every week. Join the Patreon page. Get all that bonus show content from us. That will be this weekend. And then, as Kyle teased, next Friday, special show we'll have for you here on the main feed. So yeah. That's all I got, fellas.
Main feed. Oh, that's a lot of pressure. Uh-oh.
I think it is going to be the main feed. So, yeah, that's going to be next Friday's show.
Cool.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. As always, appreciate your loyalty and tuning wherever you get your podcasts or if you're watching here on YouTube. We will be back with you real soon. Have a great weekend. Take care. We'll see you with episode 227 next week.
Peace.